Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to be learning a little bit about how you can attach actors to other actors to create this, a spawn point component that will be able to, if we go ahead and hit play, it spawns as a child of our tank, it spawns another actor, the sprung wheel BP. And we're going to figure out how that relates to the spawning of components and fully understand it so that we can create that component yourselves. So let's dive in and see how it works. Okay, so we want to attach our spring to our tank. And we basically want to spawn these actors at runtime. You could use a child actor. There's lots of reasons I'm not using a child actor. I find them quite buggy. And this way we can learn a lot more about the attachment system rather than just using something built in. So what we want to do is attach and spawn an actor to this tank so that we have wheels attached here. And then from that wheel, we want to be able to find the thing we're attached to so that we can link up the physics constraints between the wheel and the tank body. Now we're going to do this in multiple parts, but the first thing to do is create some sort of component that can spawn the actor and attach it. So for that, we need to understand a little bit more about how attachment works with actors and components. As you may know, there is a kind of hierarchy in Unreal. You have actors, and then under actors you have components. So you may think that an actor is a thing in its own right, and they kind of get childed to each other in sort of hierarchies. Well, actually, no, that's kind of a common misconception. The only things that can attach to each other are components, and in particular, scene components. So if you have a look at this, we have got the tank root here is a scene component. Then in the left track underneath it is a scene component attached to it with its own transform, or its own relative transform, and then a right track which is also attached to the tank root. But what we can do is we can spawn an actor and attach it to the right track, and that's going to mean is that the root of the wheel, for example, is going to be attached to, the root component of the wheel is going to be attached to the right track scene component. So this is a scene component, that's a scene component, they get attached to each other. And then all of its components are going to be children of the root, set up in exactly the same way as that actor was. So all that happens is you take this actor hierarchy and you attach the hierarchy underneath the right track. Now notice I've color-coded these because they do belong to something called an actor, but the actor is kind of an overlay on top of this scene hierarchy thing, these scene component hierarchies. And they don't themselves have any transforms or any notion of hierarchy, they just derive that from their root component. Let me show you. So, for example, we might have the tank actor. Its root component is the tank root, so that's where it is in the scene hierarchy. Then underneath it, we might have the wheel. Now, why is the wheel a child of the tank? Well, let me tell you why. Because its root component is a child of one of the tank's components, the right track. So that's how actors end up having a hierarchy. It's not because they have a hierarchy themselves, but rather because the root components and the components they're composed of end up having a hierarchy. So when you think about hierarchy and attachment, think about components. It's always components underlying it all, and then there are some helpful methods that help us overlay this other structure on top of it. But really what's going on under the surface is these scene components attaching to one another. Now, what really drives this home is something called getAttachParentActor. So let's go over to our source. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio, Source Battle Tank, and I'm going to go to Private Sprung Wheel CPP, and I'm going to go to its Begin Play method just for now, because what I want to do is use this getAttachParentActor. And I'm not actually going to use the result from here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to navigate to the source code, and we can have a look at the engine source code here. In fact, I do have the docs for this linked against this lecture. So if you go and have a look at the source code once IntelliSense has decided to let me, then what you're going to see is this get root components. So it's getting the root, well, basically what it's returning. Let's have a look at what it's returning. It is returning the get root component of this actor. So we are in the sprung wheel. So this is the wheel. Its root component is over here. This is our root component. And then it's saying get the attach parent. Okay, so what is this scene component attached to? It's attached to the right track. And then get the owner of the right track. So the owner of the right track is the tank. Ta-da! So what we're ending up with is a method here that allows us from the sprung wheel to get hold of, once we've got the attachment right, to get hold of the tank. And that's great because we'll be able to use that to properly attach our constraint, which we're going to be doing in later lectures. But for now, that is enough. We kind of understand the hierarchy, that's great. And what I would like to do with our understanding of hierarchy is to create a spawning component. And I'll go into a little bit more detail after I've told you one more prerequisite, which is that the opposite of this getting the attached parent is to set the attached parent in some senses. And that is this attach to component. So if you call attach to component on an actor, what's actually going on? Let's just take a little look, F12 in there, or search for it in Xcode. What you can see is that what it's really doing with attach to component is it's finding the root component, it's attaching that component. So really, if we're attaching an actor to some component, we're attaching its root component to that component. And these methods are just little helpers that allow us to do that. Okay, so I'm going to remove those now that we have understood what those methods are doing, and we're going to look at creating a spawning component. So this is going to be a challenge for you. What I would like it to do, so you should be able to position the component in the tank BP. You should be able to create this component, put it in the hierarchy somewhere in the tank BP to be a spawn point for where the wheel is going to spawn. I'd like you to be able to specify the class that it's going to spawn. This component can be as generic as possible, but it should be able to specify that we want the wheel. And then you can attach the actor to the component using the attachment knowledge you now have. And then I would like you to see in begin play of that actor, of the wheel actor, what is the attached parent actor? Now, to clarify this challenge just a little bit more, what I'm saying is that this component should be created in C++, not as a Blueprint component, which obviously you can do as well. You can create Blueprint components in Blueprint, but in C++, after all, this is a C++ course, and flex your C++ muscles. Pause the video and have a go at the challenge. Okay, welcome back. So let's give this a shot. So I'm going to go ahead and create this component first of all. Let's go to our tank BP, add component, new C++ component. It's going to be a scene component because we want to be able to position it and for it to have a transform. And then I'm going to call this the spawn point, like so. And go ahead and create the class. Pause the video if yours is taking longer, as usual. Okay, my build has finished. Let's go over to the Visual Studio and do our spawning. I'm going to do the spawning in begin play. So you've done spawning before. In fact, you've done it over in the tank aim component. So let's see how that is done. Let's look for spawn projectile. If I reset my zoom, there we go. So this is how we're spawning a projectile with a projectile blueprint. I'll use this as the template for what I'm going to do. So it is going to be, I don't care what type of actor, so I'm just going to use a actor spawn, a actor. And it's going to return the actor that was spawned. I'll call it the new actor. And we are going to need a class for it to spawn, crucially. So what is that class going to be? Well, let's go over to the aim component CPP to see how that, header file rather, see how that was done. So let's look for, oops, I'm zooming in again. Let's look for the projectile blueprint. Here we go. And use that as our template over in the spawnPoint.h. I'm going to put this in the private section. I'm going to call this the config of the class. And I am going to plop in that uProperty that is a T subclass of, in this case, it's just T subclass of a actor. We don't really care what subclass it is. And I'm just going to call it the spawn class. Okay, so in the C++, we're spawning the spawn class. Then once we've got that new actor, we need to check that it isn't null. So if not null, new actor, or rather if not new actor, I'm going to do an early return, like so. And then we can take our new actor and we can attach it. Like I was saying, it's going to be new actor, attach. Let's see, what was it actually? If we go to the documentation, attach to component. And so new actor, attach to component, this, because this is a component, it's a spawn point component. And then we've got to look at our attachment rules. So I'm going to do an F, attach transform rules, and we can do a keep relative transform if we like so, and we can go ahead and build that now. Okay, so what this should be doing is attaching the root component to this new actor. Now, one little hiccup is that at the moment, our root component, if we go and have a look at it, which is in the sprung wheel CPP, our root component is something that's simulating physics, which means it's actually going to pop out of that hierarchy. So let's make sure that we move things around. So I'm going to actually make the root component the mass wheel constraint, because the mass wheel constraint doesn't simulate physics. Even though it is a physics constraint component, it doesn't simulate physics itself. It just helps other things simulate physics. So I'm going to make that the root instead, because that should mean that we will be able to have that as part of the hierarchy. Otherwise, it's just we're going to be putting it part of the hierarchy, and then it will pop right out of the hierarchy again, which is just no good. So we're going to set everything to be childed to the mass wheel constraint and build that. And then finally, I wanted to go over to our sprung wheel CPP in the begin play, and I want to see what the result of, or whether we have a result for our get attach parent actor. Now, I suspect it's going to be null. So let's do an if statement, see if it's going to come back null, and then we can do a UE log, and we can do not null, and I'll do an else UE log null. So we can see which one of these it comes back as. So let's go ahead and build one final time, go over to our tank BP where we've got our spawn point component that was created for us. I'm going to move it under the left track. I'm going to select to go to the detail pane, go to the spawn class and change the spawn class to be the sprung wheel BP. Compile, save that, and let's go ahead, look at the output log, hit play, and there you go, warning, null. So what we've got at the moment is the get attach parent actor is null, in spite of the fact that the attachment is set up correctly. Maybe you hadn't realized about the physics thing that I just mentioned, but if you go ahead and hit play and go and look F8 out of here and look at your tank, you'll see that the tank BP does have the child actor of sprung wheel BP. And in fact, if you look a little bit closer, maybe you can select the sprung wheel and go and look at its mass wheel constraint, you'll notice that the mass wheel constraint is indeed in the correct place attached to either of the tanks that has been spawned. So if you select it for either of the tanks, you'll find that it is in the center of those tanks, exactly where it should be due to the childing of this spawn point. So we don't know what's going on there. We're going to find out in the next lecture, but for now, I think we can safely say that we understand component versus actor childing, and we're able to use it both to child and to get attached parents. So pats on the back, and I'll see you in the next lecture where we'll sort out that interesting issue.